Hey, everybody, welcome to OK Every Day, a podcast about TA where we continue diving into how to make our lives OK every day with TA. Hey, Jason,
Hey, Ollie.
today the topic of our podcast is
The stroke filter, the stroke bank.
stroke filter and the stroke bank. Now, before we go into the stroke filter and the stroke bank, you think it would be a good idea to recap what we're talking about altogether?
Yes, yes, sir. I think
Yes.
it's always a good idea, especially when it comes to strokes, which is one of our favorite topics, right, Ollie?
Yes, it is.
So, what the heck is a stroke? Okay, a stroke has to do with recognition. So, how we
Hmm.
give and receive recognition. And of course, we can do that in positive ways. So, we can give positive recognition to others, like compliments. You're looking great today, Ollie.
Thank you so much, Jason.
And of course, we can give negative strokes. I'm not going to do that, Ali. Don't worry. I wouldn't do that. Ooh, no. So there's different ways for us to give and receive, ask for or not, or as we're probably going to look at today, how we can kind of, in a way, bat away some stuff or change some stuff when that's coming towards us in terms of strokes and in terms of recognition. So that's going to lead us nicely into the stroke filter. So again, stroking is part of TA. Again, it's a word that's used in transaction analysis. It has nothing to do with a medical stroke. It has to do with how we connect and share with others. And then if we're more conscious of it, we can do it more often in the way that we want to do it.
Awesome. And thanks for that because I think in the first episode we had of this season, we that's exactly where we talked about stroke and stroking in general. And I
Mm.
think when we started off, it's just kind of with the word stroke. You don't really know what you're talking about. So yes, it is a unit of recognition that is used in TA. And if you'd like to recap of what a stroke overall is or stroking is, episodes 1, 2, 3 are the ones to look at, and 4 would be the ones that
Mm.
we're focusing on strokes generally, strokes in action from the parent, from the child, and the adult ego states. And now we're going to talk about the stroke bank, which is really, really interesting. And when we talk about the stroke bank, Jason, where do we start?
Yeah, the stroke bank, and it's kind of directly connected to the stroke filter, which we'll talk more about as well today. So the stroke bank is it's a bit like it's a concept in TA. It's a little bit like a bank account, right? If
Hmm.
you can imagine, like that's why it's used the word bank. And with a bank account, we can put in deposits and we can
Ooh.
take out. We can put in and take out deposits. Okay. So the same deal with strokes or recognition.
Hmm.
So we can uh, receive recognition that we then store away in our stroke bank,
Okay.
right? So
Wow.
we let the strokes in, or we let the recognition in.
Hmm.
Now, of course, if it's positive, then our stroke bank will start to fill up with positive, nice bits of recognition,
Hmm.
about ourselves, about the world, or about our relationships, about other people. So then we'll have this nice bank of positive recognition that start to fill up behind us, if you will.
Hmm.
If it's negative recognition that we let a lot in, well, of course,
Hmm.
our bank account will start to get full with negative strokes or negative
Hmm.
recognition, which gradually over time will put us into the red, really,
Yeah.
right? It'll start to wear away on us behind the scenes because what we're doing is we're carrying a lot of negativity.
True.
Not
Okay.
only carrying, but actually holding on to it, and then also letting more in to kind of top it up. And
Right.
over time, that works against us. It starts to chip away at our self-esteem, starts to chip away at our confidence, starts to infiltrate our relationships, so we become more cranky or anxious or whatever it might be. So the idea of a stroke bank is to become more aware of the type of recognition that you're allowing in and holding on
Hmm.
to, and of course, because we can give our own self deposits, what kind of recognition are we giving ourselves? Is it
Right.
nice and lovely and positive, or is it a bit nasty and negative?
The analogy that came to mind actually was food, believe it or
Oh,
not. Because depending on what kind of food you intake, it kind of impacts the way you feel. The better the food, the kind of the quality of the food and everything else. You can have a burger here and there. It doesn't harm you. But if you only eat burgers every day, all day, it's gonna harm the way you feel, the way you look, and the way you interpret everything that's going on.
I think
How
that's
does it
brilliant. I think it's a brilliant example or metaphor, actually,
metaphor?
because
Yeah, would be the right one.
yeah, because it's if you think about the nutritional value of food, you
Mm,
know that uh, has a lot to do with how we feel and
right.
stuff that we can't even see, right? So we might, so yeah, like you were saying, if we ate burgers every day, 3 times a day, you know, that's going to have an effect on our mood, our energy, our weight, but stuff we can't even see, which is like our heart, our the arteries
Mm,
clogging up.
right.
And that's a great example because that's what happens with negativity and negative recognition that we're holding on to. It eats away at us behind the scenes that we're not
Right.
even aware that it's eating away at us. Like our
Oh,
arteries, getting clogged up.
very
You
true.
know?
You know what? I want to apologize to you, Jason, because I
Oh,
think I skipped a little bit ahead of time with the stroke bank and asking you what the stroke bank was. It's something that we're definitely going to come back to overall. But what I wanted to find out a little bit more about would be the stroke filter and how
right.
that feeds into the stroke bank.
Yeah. And I accept your apology, sir.
I appreciate it.
But there was no need to apologize as well because it's all up for grabs, right? But
That's true.
let's start to look at how do we create this bank over time,
Mm,
right?
yeah,
And that has to do with the stroke filter, right?
right.
Which is it's called a filter because it actually filters out what we let in and what we don't let in,
Mm.
or what we allow ourselves and what we don't allow ourselves.
So kind of like a cashier at the bank.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also a little bit like some people describe it a little bit like wearing a pair of glasses,
Mm.
that actually have filters, to filter out. You imagine
Okay.
sunglasses filter out, the
Yes.
rays of the sun, which is good for us, right?
Hmm.
So another version of that is if we have a stroke filter like a glasses, we let some in and we bounce some off. Is
Okay.
another way of thinking about it. Is often a metaphor that's used. Does that make sense?
Yes. I think we'll get to it later, but we also say don't put on those pink glasses, meaning don't look at the world in a very too much positive a way.
Ah, is that a? Did they say that in Ukraine? Is that a Ukrainian phrase?
That is a Ukrainian saying. Yes, it is.
Well, there you go. Because I think in England they'd say rose tinted glasses.
There you go. That's the
So it's
analog. Hmm.
yeah. So this is great. These are two different cultures referring to exactly the same thing, which is effectively what TA is talking about. What
Right.
what kind of glasses we put onto the world affects how we see things and how we feel about things, and what's good for us and what's not good for us, right?
Right. And we're talking about the stroke and the stroke filters or the glasses that we put in, the lenses that we look through the world.
Yeah.
What kind of filters are there?
Yep. So um, when you think about stroking,
Hmm.
we're thinking about how we're recognized. So
Right.
obviously there's they're negative and positive. They're the very first ones, right?
Right. Yeah.
So how we accept or reject positive and negatives. That's part of the filter.
Hmm.
But also when we're talking about recognition, there's an aspect of identity that gets connected to recognition.
Right.
So another version then is how do I see myself or how do I believe I'm seen by others? So that's
Okay.
another filter that we might put in. So it's like if unconditional or conditional.
Right.
Is it about me or is it about what I'm doing?
Hmm.
Right. So again, if it's
Sometimes
something
that's a very
negative,
tough distinction to make.
well, that's right. Which is why some of this stuff can really affect us on a deep level. So
Hmm.
if I'm believing it's something about me that I'm not doing right or correctly or doing well enough, well, that's that's difficult to work with, as opposed to it's like, oh, maybe it's something I'm doing, and therefore I can change that,
Right.
right?
Right. So
Uh,
behavior versus the person themselves, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. What,
Hmm.
what people tend to call now personalization. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
So I'm making it personal about me or personal about somebody else.
Hmm.
It's not what he did. It's him that's the problem. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah,
oh,
that kind of like you can't solve anything with that attitude. I don't think it's very difficult to solve anything with that attitude.
yeah, yeah. Or it can be, I just don't like how he looks. Like, oh, okay. Hang on, what do you do with that? I mean, what's he supposed to do with that? That's not fair, right? So again, a lot of self-image gets caught up in this stuff, right? And it can
Hmm.
really, and often we look, Ollie, at what's the workplace.
Right.
So what do we bring into the workplace in terms of our titles? What do our titles mean to us? Because Some people chase the title. Do you know what I mean? Or they
True.
chase the salary, or they chase the power. Okay, well, that's now feeding into their stroke bank and their stroke filter, and some of it
Mm,
is unhealthy,
true.
right?
Again, coming back to the metaphor with food that we had, too much of something, even
Yeah,
healthy, might be not good for you. I mean, I think I read somewhere that even too much water can, to drinking
yeah,
too much water can cause damage,
yeah, yeah,
potentially even lethal. So there's always a limit to something that even something such as simple and positive as water can do a lot of damage.
yeah. And I think that's lovely because where's the balance?
True.
Do you know what I mean? And unfortunately, because our stroke filters are initially unconscious, we're not
Okay.
aware of finding that balance because it develops from when we're young.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're taught about recognition, how to receive it, or
Mm-hmm.
whether it's okay to ask for it, whether it's okay to give it. This is where our filter starts to kind of start off. So when we get our first little kind of baby glasses, and then gradually they get updated for different glasses, but the filter might still be there unless we slow down or think about it in a different way, right? And think
And
about how it's affecting us.
true. And given that, how we've been taught to perceive some things, we actually prepared quite a few quotes
We
that
have,
might help, especially from some popular movies, that might help us understand this transaction of stroke filters going on, right? So how they're going on together. I might kick us off if that's okay,
yeah,
with
yeah,
one quote
absolutely.
with one quote from a movie that I love, and by chance, it's also a Robin Williams movie.
Oh yeah, we like Robin.
We do like him. Good Will Hunting, and he was Robin Williams was addressing to Will Hunting. You know, you're really quite bright, Will. And Will Hunting answered, "Well, yeah, I read books,"
Mm, right?
downplaying his intelligence and just attributing everything to reading and rather than his talent. And you also mentioned when we were prepping for this that there was a slight bit of sarcasm in it, kind of
Yeah,
directed at
yeah,
at the therapist.
yeah. That's what I got from it when I first watched it. He's a bit sarky, he's a bit edgy, a bit spiky. It's Matt Damon, I think, is the actor,
Yes, it is.
and he's there was a compliment there that Robin Williams was giving. You're really quite
Mm,
bright, right? So that's a compliment. But how did Matt Damon receive it? Well, he twisted it somehow by either downplaying it or by being a bit sarky. Well, yeah, I read books. It's like
it,
screw you, man, for talking to me like that.
reminded me of a session of metaphorical session of ping pong. I was like, I give you a compliment, I smash it back to
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's what happens. That's a good example of the filter in action. Like some
Mm,
people, the listeners or the viewers might even recognize that, they may have heard this and they might have even said it themselves. I'm not very good at taking a compliment.
yeah.
That's a real indication that there's a filter active there. I mean, why would a person not be so good at taking a compliment? So there's something going on there, right?
And there's loads of those examples in real life happening as well. It's like you would say, "Oh, you look great," and somebody would say, "What, this? What, me? Oh, come on!" It's just the light, it's
Yeah.
the
What,
light
this
that's
old
falling.
dress? You look great in that dress. What, this old thing? Just twisted to fit into the filter to
Mm,
fill the stroke bank, right? So I've actually got one here because when we were looking up, it was funny kind of where you find these. Sometimes they're obvious to find, but sometimes not so obvious. And this one's from Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, who
ooh.
he's classic
Great.
at twisting it into negative, no matter what it is. He'll negatify it in some way. So Winnie the Pooh says, "Oh, good morning, Eeyore," and he says, "If it is a good morning, which I doubt." I love it. It's like, I'll just take the wind out of your sails there. Stop being nice. How do you know there's something good about this morning? So filter. EO is a really good filterer.
Filter of of anything positive into anything but positive.
Yeah, yeah. What did you had Marvin? What's
Oh,
the robot's
well,
name?
I mean, I think it's ER's relative from a different universe. Marvin the depressed robot from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And there's like I've got I think 8 quotes from him uh, because they're all just fantastic if you look at them. I think the one that stands out the most is life. Don't talk to me about life. That's like that's a classic Marvin
Yeah.
in a way. But I think his one of the ones that I like the most is I'll try to do it in Alan Rickman's voice. Rest in peace, sir. Um, my capacity for happiness, you could fit into a matchbox without taking out the matches first,
Which is minuscule, right?
which is
That's not
very
a lot.
small.
There's not much space for happiness
Very
there.
small.
But I mean, these are kind of caricatures of what we're talking about. I mean, I
Mm.
definitely think Eeyore and Marvin are connected. I mean, what was so there was another one here where Winnie the Pooh says, "Oh, Eeyore, how are you? Could be worse. Not sure how, but could be." You know, it's like I got to twist this around to fit my frame of reference. You know, my ideas about
Wow.
negative and not kind of things being good.
Very true. And what came to mind is when we were sharing these quotes, our reaction to it mostly was laughter.
Yeah.
But when we hear them in real life or in real time, it's not that funny. Although I guess laughter would be one of the reactions that are possible. So, what would you suggest? What would be a possible reaction to these kind of disregarding of compliments?
Well, I think you're spot on because we're laughing, and again, these are cartoons or cartoon characters, so they're intentionally
True.
put in there to laugh, right?
Yeah.
And in transaction analysis, we actually call it a gallows laugh, which is we're
Ah.
laughing at something that's actually not that funny, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because and there's a whole story behind gallows laughter, which I think we might have shared in a previous episode. I might go on and talk about it in a different episode. But we're laughing at something really that's not that funny because it's actually very heavy and very negative,
Mm.
right? So probably the best way to figure out a way out is to recognize when it happens,
Mm.
right? Like
Wow.
if somebody's giving me a positive compliment and either I'm rejecting it or twisting it, the first stage is to wonder why I'm doing that. You know,
Mm.
catch myself doing it. Now, I certainly often play with this with people. Like if I give them a compliment and they kind of might shrug it away, I'll probably give it to them again. Have a double take at it, right? And just to give them a chance to realize, oh,
To receive it. To receive
exactly.
it.
And often they laugh and go, oh yeah, yeah, thanks, thanks, yeah.
Ah,
So
okay.
I often do a double take because I know their filter's active, and I give them a second chance. And if they don't even get it the second time, I'll say, I just gave you a compliment. I don't know if did you hear it? You know, just to really reinforce it. But usually the second time they get it.
Right.
And every time I do that, I'm helping them just kind of wear away their filter and put something else in
Mm.
place, right? So the first thing is self-awareness. And often when I'm working with people in this area, uh, I'll invite them to have a goal, like a coaching goal around, okay, what about this do you want to change? And they say, well, I want to be
Mm.
able to, receive or give or take on more positive compliments. I say, okay, great.
Mm.
Try that this week.
Yeah.
Actively go out and give somebody a compliment, right? For a
Mm.
start, just randomly, right? And then give yourself a compliment for doing that.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, so it's like a double up, right? So
Mm.
every time you do that, you're filling up your stroke bank with positivity. One
Right.
by doing and saying a nice thing, and two by recognizing that I did and said a nice thing. And then that starts to change the deficit. You start to get into the
And
green in a way.
and what I'm hearing is also you're intentionally changing your stroke filter as well as to how you
Spot on.
perceive and how others try to perceive
Yeah,
whatever it is you're saying, right?
yeah. And over time, what you find is it's lovely. It
Mm.
starts to settle in, so you start to permanently change your filter, and then you start to
Yeah.
realize actually there's a whole world of nice stuff that you can tap into here, good energy, and it starts to
True.
whoop make you feel better. What do you think?
Oh, you know what? I mean, we've got great example, and you're right. I mean, most of these examples were made to be funny, so
Yeah.
it is something that we can laugh on. I think one of the examples I have here is also from the Imitation Game, from
Mm.
the movie Imitation Game, 2014, and it was another kind of compliment towards Alan Turing, saying, "Alan, you're brilliant." And he replied with, "Are we making progress?" Completely deflects it, and kind
Mm,
of walks in the other way. And these are the examples that I most see in the workplace. So, for
yeah.
example, you'd say something, you did this amazingly great, and this, oh, you know what, I've got a meeting to go to. Bye
Mm,
bye.
mm.
Not even a thanks or acknowledgement of that, which it kind of shows to the intensity of a lot of the workplaces happening, and that you just don't have time to acknowledge the compliment and go for it. But it also takes a lot of practice. I think as a manager, it helped me a lot to be very intentional in saying I want to be specific and praising the folks, saying that they've done a good job, but I also want them to know that what I've actually said, so that they've received and acknowledged that rather than just kind of brushed it off and went their own way.
Yeah, that's a great example. Absolutely. And, I think when certainly in leadership and certainly teamwork, it's an essential area to focus on because
Yeah.
most people come in and work hard. Most people want to do a good job and they want to get in there and work really hard. And like the example you're giving, that people move through stuff very quickly, tasks, and there's another job, there's another project, da da da. Um, so intentionally making time to provide somebody with positive feedback to me is very, very important so that they hear it also.
Mm,
And I think that's a very healthy goal that you're talking about there, Ollie.
right.
That they get that little nugget, they get that little something nice, but it won't happen unless we intentionally do it, right? Because it's so busy out there.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And I think one thing we were also talking about before this session was about the other side of the coin that we talked about, as in something negative or turning something negative into a positive.
Yeah, yeah. Traditionally
What?
called reframing,
Okay.
which is a fantastic. Um, it's actually a resiliency skill.
Okay.
So when things are tough, it's how do we see it as a challenge, and what are the positive or useful or growth worthy aspects of the challenge, as
Mm,
opposed to letting the challenge drive our negative filter. This is hard,
okay.
this is too difficult, it's too big for me, it's too rah, rah, rah. Right. Every time we create those kind of narratives, we're just expanding on the negative filter and filling our stroke bank with negativity.
Okay.
Whereas, the reality is, if you think about through the adult ego state, there are challenges in life. There will be challenges that we'll face at any time. There certainly are in work, right?
Always.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So how can I reframe this challenge as positive or growth worthy, or there's something I'm going to learn about it? Yeah.
Hmm.
So that changes our filter by reframing. It's called. It's kind of, and again, it's called reframe because it's like taking off the glasses and putting on a different pair of glasses.
Mm,
Like, so if you think about the frames of glass,
yeah.
or if it's looking at a picture, there's a picture frame. So I'm going to take off that frame and put on a different one. Still looking at the same thing, but I'm looking at it with a different mindset, right?
Right. One question that just came to mind
Mm.
here is like, if how does or does it at all, how does toxic positivity sit into this kind of, refraining everything too much into always very positive? Or is that something that could be a result of, consistent reframing without kind of analyzing what is actually going on, or what's the story there? What do you think?
Well, I know what you're talking about actually, and,
Hmm.
and this is often brought up when we explore the idea of reframing,
Okay.
because reframing doesn't automatically mean putting a positive lens on it. It just means putting a
Ah,
different lens on it,
right.
right?
That's a great lens about looking at
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Because you're quite right. Because if somebody's constantly trying to reframe things in a positive light, well, not all things are positive,
Mm,
So not everything that happens in life is positive. However, we always have opportunities to learn and grow and think differently about something,
mm,
right? So if I'm thinking differently about something, not just negative, just practical, okay, how could I problem solve this, as opposed
right.
to get worried and anxious about it? How can I problem solve this? I'm not focusing on the negative. I'm just actually changing the lens to think what's going to work in this situation.
Right.
Does that
So
make sense?
instead of, it's not about looking at it negatively, it's rather kind of finding a lens or a filter
Mhm.
say that will help us understand the situation and move forward with it,
Yeah,
rather than kind of just keeping it the way it is,
yeah.
which can be negative.
Well, the situation might feel very, very negative, but if we think about what can I do here
Yeah.
that will have a useful impact, you might want to call that will kind of how can I work with this situation? You
Mm-hmm.
know, and actually, when we were looking at it, just talking about this, Ali, you know, we came across, you know, Viktor Frankl
True.
and Man's Search for Meaning, you know,
Mm.
and he, you know, he talks a lot about reframing, and it's not necessarily about the positive; it's about what can you do in the moment to change your mindset or change your filter that will help in the
Mm.
moment. And you know, for those of you who know Viktor Frankl, he was a concentration camp survivor. Wrote a very very famous book. So his quote is, "It's not what life can offer you, but what you can offer life."
Mm.
So there's a reframe there because a lot of people think, "Oh, I deserve stuff." Like, you know, life is hard, and it's, you know, why is life doing this to me? Well, life's not doing anything to you. Life is life, right? And we're all alive, and we're in it. And isn't it great that we're in it to be alive, to have these feelings and thoughts? So then he
Mm.
reframed it to say, "No, it's what you bring that's important."
Mm.
You know, so in work, it's how much of yourself you bring, or how you can help the team, how you can help the project, how you can, and then to loop back to what we're talking about here, Ollie, is feel good about that.
Mm.
How can I feel good about what I've achieved? How can I feel good about what I've brought, or I said something in that meeting that made a
Yeah.
difference? Does that make sense?
It does make a lot of sense, and it kind of it really really nicely ties back to what you were talking about, the deposits into the stroke bank, right? So
Bingo.
what are we depositing in there? What are we actually doing?
Yeah.
What are we putting there? And how are we building up our, say, stroke bank wealth?
Yeah.
Is it through negativity, which will then, the result of that will happen, whatever happens, happens, or is it through kind of reframing? Is it finding that positive twist, or is it finding a potential solution to whatever is happening around us, right?
Yeah.
So how do you think we've progressed so far with the stroke filter and the stroke bank today?
Well, I mean, again, it shows you just when we get into this, Ali, how deep it can go.
Oh,
Do you know what I
true.
mean? Like, and I love that about transaction analysis and about understanding some of these concepts in a real practical way.
Mm,
Because I was only just when you were talking there, I was just thinking, if you think about a bank account again, we're talking about savings,
mm,
right? So literally, if we start to fill our bank account with more positive recognitions, we may actually be saving our life long term. You know,
true.
if we are nicer and bringing more of that positive energy, more of that compliments and giving and receiving, and doing less of the negative, long term, we'll do pretty well, I think, and we'll recoup it. So yes, I think we've gone to a nice place, uh, even though we had some of those dodgy quotes.
Jason, I could not have thought for a better closing for this episode. So, dear viewers, dear listeners, thank you for being with us on this episode of OK Everyday, where Jason and I talked about the stroke filter and the stroke bank. If you like this video, please press that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. If you're interested in TA content, that's great because you're in the right place. Click that subscribe button and we'll keep you informed on every OK Everyday episode coming out on YouTube and Spotify. In any case, we really hope that you stay okay
Every day.
every day.